Captain Leila Navarro adjusted the ribbon rack on her dress uniform as she stepped into the Pentagon's E-ring, where the polished floors threw her reflection back at her like a challenge. The corridors seemed to run to the horizon, a Roman road of light that led to Room D, 1103, the office of Lieutenant General Harold Vance, Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence. The plaque outside his door was aggressively simple, Vance, and the oak looked too heavy for hinges. She knocked twice. A voice rough as gravel called, "Enter." The room fit the stories. Aerial photographs in black frames, a wall of coins set in a velvet, a mahogany desk big enough to land a drone on. Behind it, Vance, silver hair cut brutally short, eyes that counted details as if they were rounds in a magazine. He didn't stand. He let the weight of the air do the work. "Captain Navarro," he said, reading from a file without looking up. "University of New Mexico. Top of your MI basic. Field tours. On-bar cost. Outstanding evals. And here, a period of special duty redacted to a shade of midnight." He glanced up then, registering the set of her shoulders, the small notch in her left earlobe, the nick on the brass of her nameplate. "Seat." Leila sat, spine not touching the chair back. The general closed the folder and folded his hands. "What separates good intelligence officers from great ones, Captain?" "Curiosity with discipline, sir," she said. "Seeing patterns without inventing them. And knowing when the pattern is you, being read." A corner of his mouth ticked. "Textbook," he said softly. He rose and strolled to the window that stared down the Potomac like a sentry. Out there, people think war is boom and banners. In here, it's pauses. How long you hold a silence matters. He turned, a new temperature in his gaze. "Tell me why young officers like you show up polished, fluent, and certifiable, yet fall apart when the questions stop being printed." Leila let the beat stretch. She folded her right thumb over her palm, curled 3 fingers, and, without thinking, drew 2 knuckles down the inside of her sleeve cuff. A reflex, a tiny fidget for muscle memory. Vance's eyes snapped to the motion like a hawk. Color drained from his face. He stared at her hand as if it had spoken. "Where?" he said, voice suddenly unsteady. "Did you learn that cue?" The room got smaller. Leila kept her breathing even. The cue was nothing, a private signal for a very specific context that officially had never existed. Vance's chair scraped the floor as he reached for a secure handset. "This is Vance. De 2003. Initiate lockdown. Now." The door clicked and stayed that way. The windows threw light across the carpet like bars. 2 security officers took stations, silent and stone-faced. A major in an impeccable uniform arrived with a canvas case, extracted a small device, and set it on the desk. Its green diode pulsed slowly, swallowing sound in a faint hum. "Recorder off," Vance said. "We do this in person." He nodded to the colonel who had arrived with the device. Priya Deshmukh, lean and watchful, hair pulled into a severe bun. At her shoulder hovered Major Cal Owens, skeptical by default. Deshmukh slid into the chair opposite Leila and lifted the file. "Captain Navarro," she said evenly, "you are not under arrest, but you're under a security hold. Answer carefully. How do you know the Raven Q?" Leila's mouth went dry. Not SEAL, not agency hand talk. Raven, a word she had not heard spoken in 3 years, not outside a wind-cut rooftop and a prayer said into her sleeve. "I don't know that phrase," she said, honest in a narrow way. Owens barked a laugh with no humor in it. "The 2-knuckle drop on the inner cuff is a nonverbal marker used by elements of special warfare to mean, observer is us, under deep cover, do not acknowledge. It is not taught. It is not written. It's inherited. People killed to keep it clean." Deshmukh tapped the file. "Your record shows 8 months at a joint fusion cell during the year you're not authorized to discuss. No travel vouchers. No daily reports. No sign-in logs. You expect us to believe the Pentagon misfiled you for nearly a year." Leila looked past them at the coin wall. 1 coin was black enamel, no inscription. She knew where it came from and what it cost. "Ma'am," she said, I have complied with every classification instruction placed on me. I took an oath to a finding with names I still don't know. The door opened, and a man who wore calm like a coat stepped in. Navy service dress, starburst at his shoulder, Rear Admiral Owen Slate. The security officers straightened by instinct. Slate nodded to Vance, to Deshmukh, then to Leila like a teacher recognizing a student's handwriting. "General," he said, "let me borrow the captain." Vance's jaw worked, then settled. He flicked his eyes at the green diode. Deshmukh reached over and clicked the device off. The silence that followed was ordinary. Slate took the chair facing Leila and placed a matte black coin on the desk, the same kind on the wall. No letters, just a compass rose so dark it caught light like a secret. "Good afternoon, Lark," he said quietly. "Long time." "Sir," Leila answered, throat tight. Slate's use of the call sign detonated memory. Lark. That had been a name they used because her voice on the radio had carried above gunfire like something winged. Major Owens shifted. "Admiral, close the loop," Slate told him, not unkindly. "You don't have read-in. Not for Sable, 9, or its secondment." Deshmukh's eyes barely widened, but Leila saw the calculation there. Sable 9. The name lived in the same drawer as old oaths and painful grace. Vance remained near the window, face unreadable, arms folded. Slate tapped the coin with his index finger. 3 years ago, you were loaned to us under a humanitarian alias. You went through special communications for nonverbal link-up. You learned exactly 8 gestures. You were told never to use them outside the corridor and never, ever inside this building. Today, you used one unconsciously in front of General. That means your training didn't just stick. Your bones remember it. Leila let out the breath she had been holding since the knock on the oak door. "I didn't mean to signal, sir." He pushed, and my hands went where they go. Vance spoke for the first time since locking the room. "You're confirming an operation I have never seen on paper." "Correct," Slate said, "because the paper thinks it was a logistics assessment in the Levant. It also thinks Lark here was an NGO freight coordinator for Bridge Aid. What the paper doesn't say is that Bridge Aid's warehouse abutted a smuggling corridor feeding a militia with an appetite for spectacle, and that our team needed a local voice to make the corridor speak." Deshmukh set her pen down. "We spent 6 hours today proving there was no fusion cell with her name on the rolls." She met Leila's eyes. "The absence is a presence." Slate nodded, as if approving a student's thesis. "Permission to speak in specifics, sir?" he asked Vance. "Granted," Vance said even, "because I like to know the names of the ghosts in my house." Slate turned back to Leila. "Take us back to Port Harrer. The first week. Start at the pier. Tell it straight." Salt lived in the air at Port Harrer the way grief lives in old bones. Cargo cranes juddered like patient animals. Bridge Aid's warehouse sat behind a gate painted a blue that optimism would have liked to claim. Inside, pallets of powdered milk and packets of antibiotics stacked up in neat hope. That was the cover story. Under it, the actual story ran like wire. Chief Petty Officer Aaron Pike had taught Leila the 8 raven cues in a room with bare walls and a clock that did not tick. Pike didn't mince vowels or patience. "You'll be in rooms where you can't whisper and you can't text," he said. "You'll be watched by people who count blinks. These are for then." The first time they used one was at the fish market. The sky a skillet. The smell a sermon. Leila wore a Bridge Aid vest and pushed a crate cart between stalls where knives flashed and scales hissed. She felt eyes on her, a seller with a birthmark on his cheek, not looking, then looking. She adjusted her sleeve and let her 2 knuckles fall, once like a sigh. The seller wiped his blade and tapped the counter twice, a reply. Friendly eyes, observer in place. She exhaled. Her job was to make friends at the docks and let those friendships carry like radio. She learned which captains cheated their crews and which ones prayed before tying a bowline. She learned that boys in red caps carried messages and men in sandals carried rumors. She learned the name Al Halleck, the barber, because people said it softly and then said something else. The barber belonged to a militia that cut things that didn't belong to them. Cables, supply lines, the necks of promises. Exfil routes were discussed in a different building with a different smell. Slate's team moved like it had 3 shadows for each person. Leila learned to speak just badly enough to pass. Perfection was suspicious where she walked. In the long afternoons, she would sit on the stoop of Bridge-Aid's warehouse and call out to children in Arabic to stop climbing the forklift. She built the cover story one skull at a time. On the 12th day, Pike came late, clothes dusty, eyes harder. He leaned on the door jamb and didn't come inside. "New rule," he said. "No more patterns. The barber's men are paying attention to who eats where." He watched her face. "Say it." "No patterns," she repeated. "Eat when I can. Sit where I don't. Smile at women. Count men." He nodded. "Lark, if you need to disappear, you use the harbor mouth. The tug whistler owes me a favor. 2 long horn blasts, then 1. If you hear that, go east. If you need the team, Raven Q on your cuff twice. Twice means distress." "What's once?" she asked, already knowing. "Once means, I'm here, don't look at me." "Sir," she said, but he had already melted into the heat. The morning it broke clean. Leila arrived at the safe shop, a clock repair storefront where nobody got their watch fixed, and found the front rolled up and the counter empty. In the back room, the little cot with a boy in the red cap had slept was stripped, the sheet balled in a corner. On the concrete floor, a dark stain the size of a palm. No shouting, no gunfire, just subtraction. On the wall, chalk that wasn't there the day before, a curve with a line through it. Someone's lazy fish. It wasn't. Pike had taught her the same curve in a different context. The barber's mark. She left by the alley. She didn't run. Running speaks. The market smelled wrong. People were waiting for something to land, the way a town holds its breath when thunder pauses. Leila cut across toward Bridge-Aid, calculating. If the safe shop was burned, the backup sites were compromised by adjacency. The team would move. She had to tell them not to come to her, to treat her as lost cargo. Her phone buzzed once, a number she didn't recognize. She answered in Arabic. A man's voice, syrup and steel. "Bridge-Aid? We appreciate your assistance. Today, we will assist you. Please send your driver to Gate 4 with all your IDs. We will escort your shipment to its proper destination." Her hand went cold. "Who is this?" "Your barber," the voice said cheerfully, and hung up. 2 boys with no business near Bridge-Aid's fence began loitering with purpose. From the pier, a sound rose. 1 long horn blast, then another. Ships talk to each other like whales. To everyone else, it's weather. She waited for the 3rd horn that would tell her to run east and never stop. Instead, she heard 1 short note, clipped, almost embarrassed. 2 long, 1 short. The tug whistler was speaking Pike's sentence into the air. The team was coming for her, while the barber was coming for the team. That was the trap. Make the asset cry for help and let loyalty do the work. Leila pulled a crate of powdered milk to the loading bay and shouted for the forklift just like any logistics coordinator would. Her mind drew a rectangle around the harbor, a map of currents, alleys, security cameras that worked only on Tuesdays, the place where the shore crane's shadow fell at noon. She rolled her sleeve back, deliberately this time, and dropped her knuckles to her cuff twice. Then she didn't move. Across the road, a man eating sunflower seeds paused mid-spit and adjusted his cap. That was not neighborhood behavior. She smiled at him like he'd told a joke only she got. He looked away too quickly, then looked back. She had just told friendlies she was in distress, and enemies she was careless. The dangerous thing was to play both parts and hope neither audience applauded. Pike didn't kick in doors. He rearranged air. 30 minutes after the horn code, a group of dock workers drifted toward Bridge-Aid with casual cohesion. Men she'd seen 100 times, carrying coils of rope and arguing about football. Their leader wore a shirt with a fish on it and a burn scar at the neck. He didn't look at Leila when he walked by, which is how she knew him. Pike without the uniform, rearranging air. Leila palmed her phone and dialed a number that didn't ring. It opened a mic to a frequency that did not exist. "Bird in the mouth," she whispered into her sleeve. "Barber wants Gate 4. He has watchers. Correct for mirror." "Say again." "Correct for mirror." Her sleeve rasped. Mirror corrected. A voice that might have been Slate's or might as well have been a cliff face. "Move on the 3." Leila looked up at the harbor crane's clock and counted to 3/4 hours on her breath. At the 2, she pushed the crate onto the forklift and began to back it out, beeping in the pose of every board operator in every port. She knocked over a traffic cone with guilty flourish. The guard at the corner laughed and told his friend she drove like his aunt. At the 3, the world changed shape. The tug whistler slid across the harbor mouth like a bishop on a chessboard and let loose 2 long, 1 short. A second time, louder, defiant. A small fishing boat that had no business hugging the pier bumped a piling and spun like it had made a mistake. Men on the dock cursed. Pike's dock workers shouted back. Someone threw a coil of rope on purpose and made it look like an accident. The barber's watchers had to look 8 places at once. Their discipline frayed. Leila turned the forklift too tight and wedged the crate between 2 bollards with theatrical clumsiness. "Ya Allah," she said, throwing up her hands, and jumped down to direct herself. "Back, back, back! Stop, idiot!" She smacked the forklift's hood, drew eyes to her, burned their attention on something harmless. The fishing boat coughed smoke. A boy in a red cap, another, not theirs, began to shout about fuel leaking. Whistles blew. Port authority, militia, everyone wanted to be in charge. In the clamor, a door 2 warehouses down opened, and 3 men fell out who had probably never worked a dock day in their lives. They were moving like men who had been pinned for hours and finally saw sky. Chief Pike was one of them, but now he was a dock worker again, cursing at a rope that didn't want to coil. Gunfire stuttered from a rooftop, 3 sharp syllables. The crowd ducked in a wave. Leila dove behind the forklift and rolled into the angle where the bollard met concrete. The first rounds hit the forklift's mast, showering her with sparks. She crawled, slow, low, the way instructors shout at you, and felt the scrape of grit on her palms. A militia pickup roared, braked, fishtailed. The barber's men were supposed to be invisible until the invitation. They came visible, impatient, hungry. "Bird," Slate's voice said in her ear, calm, so calm. "You will stand on my mark." "Sir, there." "On my mark." Pike's men were no longer arguing about football. They were pulling a net from the fishing boat with too much strength for men with office backs. The net tangled, on purpose, between the piling and a mooring cleat. The tug nudged, the net tightened, and a militia pickup that had been idling too near found itself legally married to the pier. "Mark," Slate said. Leila stood up. 3 things happened at once. The forklift, which had been idling, popped into gear and rolled, driverless, into the trapped pickup's front fender. The pickup swayed. Men swore. One squeezed a trigger at nothing. Every eye that wasn't Pike's snapped to the noise. And Leila, Bridge-Aid's harried coordinator who had just made a rack of milk into a traffic hazard, lifted both arms like a frustrated official and waved the tug forward with an authority she didn't have. It obeyed. Whoever looked at her saw a woman beyond her pay grade trying to boss boats. Nobody saw the 3 men who slid through the shadow between warehouse and water and fell into the fishing boat like a whisper. They got away like bad luck leaving a room. Leila could have gone then. The plan, if such a thing exists in moments like these, said she should fall, act rattled, and disappear into a locker room with a broken lock. She could have returned to Bridge-Aid, let the barber's men spin their anger on traffic cones. She could have waited for the valve to close on its own. Instead, she saw a boy in a red cap who was not theirs look at the fishing boat and see a shape he understood. He turned, took a breath to be important, and Leila moved. Not fast. Fast as alarm built into it. She walked. She got between the boy and the militiaman he was going to impress with his eyes. She bumped the boy and dropped her phone at his feet. It clattered. In the reflex beat where he looked down, she took his shoulders and directed him behind her back and said, in a voice every aunt uses in every language, "Find your mother." The militiaman saw a woman scolding a child in a vest with a charity logo. He didn't see 3 men become 2 men and 1 shadow. A round crack passed and skated off the forklift mast. Leila felt heat brush her hairline. When fear arrives that close, it is not abstract. It is a hand sliding up your spine. She pivoted behind a stack of sacks and considered staying there until the world chose a winner. Then Pike's voice, not on the net, but in the air above the chaos. Reached her. Not a word, not a command, just a sound she had learned to hear. "We're not leaving you. You idiots," she muttered at men she loved and men she didn't know. She stepped out again into the edge of the noise and moved toward the pier with the calculation of someone counting a high wire. She lifted her sleeve once, "Here, don't look," and let her eyes go empty so anyone watching would see nothing worth reading. At the pier, a woman with hands like maps sat on a crate and watched the fishing boat drift. "Ya binti," the woman said. "You're walking crooked." "I'm busy," Leila answered, and the woman stood, tugged a knot, and the net fell just enough to foul the pickup's rear tire. "Now they're busy," the woman said, and patted Leila's cheek like a blessing. A whistle shrieked. Port Authority finally remembered it was in charge. Men with armbands flooded the scene, half of them sincere, half of them bought, all of them loud. The barber's men didn't like being shouted at by amateurs. Their discipline cracked along lines you couldn't see until afterward. Slate's fishing boat rotated with the tide, put the sun behind it, and became glare. Pike vanished inside its shadow. Leila sunk into the motion, letting chaos carry her to the exact place on the pier where a mooring line cleat had a hairline fracture that made it sing under strain. She put her hands on it like she was steadying herself and felt the vibration of the tug's engine transmitting through metal like a heartbeat. Too long. One short. Again. "Good girl," it said, and she wanted. When the barber realized his watchers had been watching the wrong story, it was too late to edit. He arrived himself, a man with barbered hair and a kind smile that told you he had learned early how to make bad news sound like advice. He saw Leila, and his smile did not change. "Bridge 8, he said. "You cause so much trouble." "We deliver milk," she answered. "So much trouble for milk." He reached out, as if to fix a loose thread on her vest, and, with the grace of a man who had done this before, put 2 fingers on her wrist and measured a pulse that did not betray her. "Next time," he said softly, "you will not be here first." He tapped her cuff, once like a joke. Leila kept her breathing the same. He turned. He was gone. It was over. Nobody applauded. They debriefed in a place that wasn't on a map, with water that tasted of tin and air that smelled of somebody else's cigarettes. Slate watched Leila chew 3 bites of a protein bar and then remember to swallow. Pike slept sitting up, woke when anyone said the word gate, and then slept again. The numbers were not terrible, which is not the same as good. 2 hurt, one of Pike's men with a graze that scared everyone and bled like a story, a boat scraped, a pickup ruined, several egos wounded. The barber would pay for the humiliation with somebody else's skin. Bridge Aid would mend its fence. A report would be written in invisible ink and mailed to a mailbox that didn't accept mail. Slate called Leila into a room with a low ceiling. He placed a single page on the table and turned it so she could read. The heading had no seal, only a date and a word that wasn't a word. Authorization. In the middle, a clause that said, "Subject is authorized to misrepresent, to deny, to disappear." "This is the paper soul I promised you," he said. "You will come home as cargo. You will check into an office that will not ask you any questions. When someone important tests you, you will pass or fail and live with both." Leila looked at the line where she had to sign and saw a version of herself that would never get to set this down. "Did we save anyone?" she asked. "We prevented a spectacle," Slade answered. "A thing that eats calendars and fills graves." He tapped the coin again. "No statue." She signed. Her name looked less like a name than usual. Back in the States, the entry on her record said Joint Fusion Cell, Orientation and Assessment. The address listed was a building under renovation that never finished renovating. The floor she was assigned to didn't exist. She went back to briefings with coffee that tasted like compliance and explained SIGINT trends to people who nodded. On Fridays, she ran until her lungs burned just to feel something honest. And now, years after the crane's shadow and the tug's talk, she had accidentally pulled a ghost into a bright office by moving the wrong fingers on the wrong cuff in front of the wrong general. The secret she had been told to carry like a bone knife had sliced her own sleeve. "Captain Navarro," Deshmukh said in the present tense, in the room with the green diode dark. Do you understand why we scare easily? Yes, ma'am, Leila said. I scare easily, too. Vance came back to the desk and sat, hands flat. For a long moment, he studied the black coin as if it might translate something. My son, he said finally, in a voice that carried no rank, went through a selection board I wasn't supposed to know about. He didn't make it. He told me once there was a signal for, I'm friendly but burned, do not acknowledge. He never showed it to me. He looked at Leila, not unkindly. In my test today, the push, the insinuation, was designed to reveal vanity or fragility. It shouldn't have reached whatever drawer you keep that hand cue in. That's on me. Leila blinked once. She found her voice smaller than she liked. Sir, I shouldn't have. No, Vance said. We don't punish muscle memory in this office. We respect it. We also don't let orphans of special programs wander the building unchaperoned. He nodded to Slate. Fix it. Slate slid an envelope across the desk. Inside, a citation with all the nouns removed, for actions on or about a day that is not today, in a place that is and isn't a place, under conditions of risk and uncertainty. The subject did a thing that prevented a worse thing. At the bottom, a ribbon device Leila had never seen. It felt heavier than its grammar. This will live in a sealed annex, Slate said. If you ever need to prove to someone with scissors that you're not fabric, show them this. He added a coin to the desk, another black one, and pressed it toward Vance. And you get this for your wall because you asked the right questions in the wrong order and then didn't double down. Deshmukh stood and offered her hand to Leila. Her grip was warm and complicated. I'm going to pretend I didn't meet you until our next meeting. At that meeting, I will evaluate your fitness for a new role with a lot of stairs and very few windows. You will be defensive and funny. After that, we'll work well together. Owens hovered, then surprised himself by saying, I owe you an apology, Captain. I treat empty boxes like evidence of theft. Sometimes they're just where we keep the expensive stuff. Leila allowed herself a small, tired smile. Sometimes they're both. Vance leaned back, something like relief washing through the set of his shoulders. One last thing, he said. Why Lark? Pike had given it to her on the second week, when she'd made the radios sing by standing in a stairwell and letting her voice bounce. Because when she talks, he'd told the team, things find their way home. Leila shrugged. Because somebody thought I sounded like daylight, she said, and Slate's mouth quirked as if he remembered a joke that had kept men awake. They lifted the lockdown, the heavy door side, and remembered how to be a door. Leila signed a log she would never be allowed to see again. Slate held the handle for her like an old-fashioned gentleman or a very modern courtesy, and when she passed, he said softly, You saved a boy who wasn't yours. The barber noticed. If you smell cologne that reminds you of mint and gun oil, leave the room. I always leave rooms with that smell, she said, not smiling. Outside, the corridor did its mirroring trick. People moved past her carrying coffee and decisions. Somewhere on a different floor, a printer coughed. Somewhere out there, Port Harrow remembered a day that had shuffled its pieces and gone quiet. Leila walked toward the river entrance, toward a sliver of actual sky spearing the building's geometry. As she reached for the badge reader, her phone buzzed once with a number that didn't ring. She didn't answer. She allowed herself one glance at the Potomac, which glared back with an honest face. In her palm, the citation in its plain envelope felt like ballast, not trophy. She stopped under a flag and dialed a different number, one that did ring, very faintly, down a long corridor of distance. After 3 beats, a voice she hadn't heard since Salt Air said, This line's dead, but go ahead. You still owe Whistler a case of beer, Leila said. A chuckle. Lark, thought you were cargo. I was, she said. Now I'm freight with a desk. You always were complicated. You good. She thought about the door and the coin and the man whose test had cut her sleeve open by accident. She thought about the boy in the red cap and the woman who made knots answer. She thought about 2 long, 1 short, and how a harbor can learn a language if you teach it kindly. I'm good, she said, and I might be needed. Copy, Pike said. New tide rolling. If you hear 2 long and 2 short this time, it means we get to be honest for an hour. She laughed, brief and surprised, and the laugh lifted something that had been heavy since the chalk fish on the floor. "I'll listen." She ended the call and stepped into the September light. A courier jogged past with a stack of folders. A junior officer practiced his salute on a reflection. Somewhere, in a windowless room, a device's green diode pulsed, and somewhere else, a tug pushed against the harbor mouth and told the water to make room. Leila rolled her sleeve down deliberately and let her hand relax. She didn't need the cue today. The people who needed to know now knew. The people who didn't could keep their peace. Tomorrow would bring a briefing with Deshmukh, a polite war with an interagency committee, a new map to learn with allies that thought they were secrets. Tonight, for the first time in 3 years, she would eat a meal without counting exits first. She would tuck the envelope into a book and forget which book. She would put the black coin on her dresser where sunrise would catch it and make it briefly visible. On the river, a boat sounded its horn once, then again, nothing special. Traffic, weather, somebody going home. She smiled at that and walked toward the turnstiles, into the building, back out of it, wherever the day wanted her next.